Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? Hope you're all well. Now, before we kick off with this webinar, if anybody's having any sort of technical challenges in viewing this stream at all, what I highly recommend is to just give this web browser page a quick refresh. That is, if you're tuned in on your laptop or a desktop computer, just hit that little refresh icon on your web browser now. Alternatively, if you are tuned in on your smartphone or a tablet device, feel free to come out of the YouTube app and then click back onto the link that you received for this training session. Hopefully everything should be working for you correctly. Now, for those of you who are okay and can hear and see me clearly, that is great. One thing that I will kind of let you know of is feel free to have a pen and paper on hand. I always think it's quite sort of useful when we're kind of going through kind of training or kind of webinar sessions, just like these. It's always nice to kind of have something on hand, just to kind of jot down your thoughts and kind of anything that you think, oh yeah, I might make a note of that so I can revisit that a little bit later. So feel free to have a pen and paper on hand, or if you're a little bit kind of too kind of technology advanced, I guess, like myself, feel free to kind of use whichever note-taking device, especially from my point of view, because my handwriting isn't very great. So feel free to kind of use something just as kind of a little bit of a tool as we progress throughout this session. One thing to also note is that captioning is available throughout the course of this session. So if you hover over onto this YouTube video, you'll see that there's a small rectangle icon with the two letter C's in there. So you can click on that to toggle captioning on or off throughout the course of this session. Okay, so I hope everyone's okay and geared up for this session. So welcome to this Google Digital Garage webinar session, all about how you can build engaging presentations. My name is Rikesh. I'm going to be your presenter, taking you through the course of this session, which is going to last for approximately 60 minutes. So I'll kick off with a little bit about me. So I'm a trainer for Google's digital skills program, Google Digital Garage. As well as that, I'm also a digital marketer. So I work with businesses to help them to create and to grow an online presence in order to attract more customers and clients to them. Now, part of my job does involve trying to sort of acquire new clients. And when I do try to kind of acquire new business, I tend to have to do a pitch or deliver some sort of presentation. And this is something which I'm sure many of us have done in different kind of in different mediums, including such as when we're presenting a little bit of coursework at school, or we've delivered kind of presentations in other kind of industries that we've needed to as well. So this is what we're going to be discussing about today, and all about how to build engaging presentations. So not just presentations where we kind of stand up and deliver, but we want to make sure that the audience, whether that be customers, clients, potential clients, whether that be recruiters, are going to be invested and interested in what you have got to say. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's session. So that's a little bit about me. I'd also like to introduce to you at this stage my colleague and fellow Google Digital Garage trainer, and that is the wonderful Anthea. Now, Anthea is going to be our chat moderator today. So you might have noticed on YouTube already that on the right-hand side that there is a live chat box. That is your space over the course of this next hour to drop in your questions, drop in your thoughts. There'll also be questions on screen, so feel free to get involved. I'd love to kind of read out some of your answers, especially on a topic like this, on building engaging presentations. We've all kind of sat through various presentations in our time, so feel free to kind of provide your kind of input as we go along, and I'd love to kind of read out as many of your questions or comments as possible. And Anthony will be keeping an eye on the chat as well, and we'll also be dropping in useful links, so feel free to kind of keep an eye on the live chat as we do go along. In order to type away into the live chat box, you will simply just need to sign into your YouTube account, which is very quick and easy to do. Now, this session on building engaging presentations is one of many webinars that we actually run as part of a wider Google Digital Garage webinar offering. So if you have a look down below me where I'm pointing, you will see that there's a video description box. Contained within there is a link to the Google Digital Garage website. So many of you will already be semi-familiar with this website, because that is the website that you signed up for this webinar session as well. So feel free to have a look at some of the other webinar topics. It's on the live training tab that you'll see a list of other topics available for you to attend at no charge. Another fantastic resource available at no charge is the online courses section on the Google Digital Garage website, where you'll see kind of a list of lots of different courses that you can complete in your own time and at your own pace, which are provided by Google. And there is a course in there on there in particular called the Fundamentals of Digital Marketing, which is a course you'll see at the top of that list. And this is a course that in particular provides you with an added bonus of receiving a certificate from Google at no charge, recognizing that you've completed that course. So definitely check out all those resources on the Google Digital Garage website. But without further ado, let's have a look at what we're covering in today's session, all about you can build engaging presentations. So in this session, we're going to be going through kind of a bit of a journey. So first of all, we're going to be looking at how we can craft our presentations. So this is all about kind of the approach side of things. So if we think about this as kind of the preparation stage before we actually go ahead and create a presentation, because then step 2 is where we're going to be talking about the design and creation stage of creating an effective and engaging presentation. And then the third and final step that we're going to be looking at is just looking at some essential presentation skills. Some of these skills you might already be using and incorporating already. Some of these skills that you might want to kind of jot down as we go along and think, oh yeah, that's a good point. Let me kind of jot that down and maybe incorporate that in my own kind of presentation style going forward as well. Now, before we get into the first part of this webinar session, I want to draw your attention to this fantastic resource. So you can see here, free career certificates available from Google. So for those of you who are based in the UK and are looking to kind of improve your job ready skill set, you can now check out Google career certificates. The link's on screen here, and I'm sure that Anthony will kindly drop the link into the chat for you as well. So these are Google's flexible online training programs, which are designed to earn you job ready skills in a variety of what Google have identified as both high growth and high demand careers. So these are areas such as the likes of project management, data analytics, user experience design. There's also ones on the likes of digital marketing and e-commerce as well. And you'll see kind of the full list on the website as well. So the beauty of these online training courses is that upon completion, you receive a free certificate from Google, career certificate. And this is a natural kind of progression in with the aim of helping you to get hopefully an entry-level position within one of those kind of industries that you've taken a course on in particular. So definitely kind of check out this resource if this is applicable to you. Now, before we get into the first part of this training session, I just want to give a few hellos. As I know some of you have been kind of dropping in where you're tuning in from. So we've got Elakia tuning in from India. Welcome to you. We've got Salma from Egypt. We've got DJ Talis tuning in from the UK. We've got Dina from the UK as well. We've got Pravin tuning in. We've got Nandini as well as Kara from the UK. We've also got Ali from Pakistan. So welcome to you all. I hope that you find this session useful. Now, for those of you who've already kind of typed away into that live chat box and give me your kind of hello or kind of introduction, what I'd like for you to do is answer this question. And for those of you who haven't yet typed anything into the live chat, feel free to get involved now, because I want to ask you this question, which is, what's the most memorable presentation that you've experienced? Now, I will kind of caveat this and say you can either give me an answer of a memorable presentation that you've attended in person or virtually. So feel free to kind of let me know an example in the chat, something that was memorable. Now, it could be memorable in a good way because it maybe inspired you, maybe entertained you, but it could be memorable in the opposite way, whereby it was absolutely dreadful. And that's why it was memorable, because it was a really, really awful presentation. So it's only kind of fair if I kind of share some of my most memorable presentations. If I kind of start off with a presentation that was probably a little bit dreadful, this was kind of a number of years ago when I went to a comedy gig, and there was a comedian who wasn't the main act, but was kind of like the warm-up act, and he was going through his routine. However, the one thing that he never got to was he was telling a very long story to get to a punchline, but that punchline, that joke, never came. He just kept elongating. And that was something that, as a presentation, albeit it was a stand-up routine, it kind of stuck with me, because I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is really, really, really awful here. Because a lot of other people, myself included, after the intermission, we didn't come back for the second part of his act either as well. So that's kind of from a dreadful point of view. In terms of a memorable presentation I've experienced in person, this was probably something that always comes to my mind is when I was studying as in the UK, we have like GCSEs. So I think it was about 15 or 16 years old. I was in science class, and my science teacher was amazing because he was able to kind of grasp his audience. So the audience in terms of the students that were in his class, myself included, were either kind of playing sports for the local or for the school sports teams, or just had an interest in sports. For me, I wasn't good enough to play into the school sports team, which is still a little bit of a sore point. But I had genuine interest. And the beauty of my science teacher is that when he was talking about kind of different processes and concepts, so for example, when he was talking about the likes of photosynthesis, he'll go through, this is the process of photosynthesis, but then he'd actually go back and then talk about photosynthesis and actually give it kind of an analogy in terms of football. So this particular part of the process will be the goalkeeper, this would be the attacker, this would be the midfielder, defender, etc. as well. And that helped kind of contextualize things in my mind. So when I kind of sat there and took my science test for my GCSEs, and I got a question about photosynthesis, my mind went straight back to that class that I sat in when he was giving that example, and that helped me remember the answer for that question that was on the exam paper as well. So that's something that I experienced in person. In terms of virtually, a memorable presentation that I experienced was, I'm sure many of you might have kind of tuned in for these either through the website or through YouTube, is TED Talks. And a really memorable presentation I sat through on a TED Talk once was by an American author called Simon Sinek, called Start With Why. Definitely a very inspiring presentation, and memorable presentation that I kind of sat through as well. So they're kind of my examples. Now, just kind of having a look at some of your memorable presentations that you've listed down. So we've got some examples here. So Emily's mentioned Brené Brown. So incredible presentation on TED Talk, like through TED Talks, humorous but to the point, incredibly engaging, authentic, and memorable. Yeah, absolutely. Pravin's mentioned engaging and fun presentation in person given by my supervisor. Yeah. Adding sarcasm and being confident at the same time. Yeah, it's kind of great to kind of mix it up rather than just being very kind of very monotonous in terms of your delivery. You want to kind of spice things up a little bit, just kind of add a little bit of kind of flavors. Things like sarcasm, things like humor are really kind of are really great ways of making you as a presenter engaging. That's something that we'll talk about when we talk about presentation skills a little bit later on as well. Kara's mentioned presenting in my final graded assessment at uni. I was told to deliver the points with more confidence. I remember that feedback. Yeah, I think it's important to always get feedback when it comes to kind of presentation, especially if you've not done it for that long as well, or you don't do it that often. It's kind of nice to kind of get pointers from other people to kind of get that kind of useful critique as well. And the final moment presentation is Ali, who's mentioned Never Give Up on Your Dreams, which is a TED Talk. So thanks very much for those memorable presentations. So it's great to kind of get just to kind of get us into the zone of kind of presentations, what we've kind of learnt and kind of listened to in general as well. So let's have a look at the reasons why we present, or why people present, if we're thinking about kind of those memorable presentations that we've kind of experienced and kind of sat through. So you can see kind of three reasons why we tend to present. One of them is to communicate a message or get our point across. Another reason is that we present to persuade our audience in thinking a certain way that we are thinking. And the third kind of way in which we present is to instruct. So if we think about kind of sales pitches or kind of television adverts, sometimes the presentation there is done to instructors to go ahead and buy this product or inquire about a particular service, perhaps as well. Now, we do also present for other reasons, such as to inspire, something I mentioned in regards to kind of TED Talk presentation that some of you also alluded to as well. And also sometimes we also present to entertain. So if we kind of think about kind of TV, films, if you think about kind of if you think about kind of television presenters, some of them just tend to present to entertain as well. So there's many different kind of reasons why we entertain. And I want you to kind of keep that in mind, because what I'm just going to be showing you here is just a short video clip of a TED Talk presentation. And while we're kind of going, while you're kind of listening to this, I want you to just kind of think in your mind as to what is the main kind of goal and what is the main reason for this TED Talk presenter being on stage. Are they looking to communicate? Are they looking to persuade? Are they looking to instruct? So I'm just going to play this short clip for you now.
What you're doing right now at this very moment is killing you. More than cars or the internet, or even that little mobile device we keep talking about, the technology you're using the most almost every day is this, your tush. Nowadays, people are sitting 9.3 hours a day, which is more than we're sleeping at 7.7 hours. Sitting is so incredibly prevalent, we don't even question how much we're doing it. And because everyone else is doing it, it doesn't even occur to us that it's not okay. So instead of going to coffee meetings or fluorescent lit conference room meetings, I ask people to go on a walking meeting to the tune of 20 to 30 miles a week. It's changed my life. You'll be surprised at how fresh air drives fresh thinking, and in the way that you do, you'll bring into your life an entirely new set of ideas. Thank you.
Okay, so that was just a very short 1-minute clip of that particular TED Talk presentation by Nilofer Merchant. The actual whole TED Talk presentation is only about 4 minutes tops. And feel free to kind of watch the whole thing. I'm sure that Anthony will be able to kind of drop a link into that for that particular TED Talk if you want to watch the whole thing. But the reason why I just wanted to show you this 1-minute clip is this essentially kind of captured the essence of why this TED Talk presenter Nilofer was on stage. And just kind of picking up on some of your kind of reasons that you were thinking about as you were listening and kind of tuning into that video. So Emily's mentioned to shock and educate. That was the reason, kind of that was the purpose for this TED Talk presenter being on stage. Ella Kai has mentioned to educate as well. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Education sometimes is a very important is a very important kind of reason and factor, and that kind of feeds into communication. So if you thought either communication, if you thought persuade, if you thought if you thought kind of inspire, instruct as well, so you'd be along the right lines, because sometimes these lines can be blurred. It's not the case of if we're presenting to communicate, or if we're presenting to instruct, or we're presenting to persuade. Sometimes there can be kind of elements of all of these sometimes as well. So with this TED Talk presenter, Nilofer was presenting to educate, so to communicate, but also to persuade us to be more active, and also was looking to kind of instruct us. So when we do next have a meeting, rather than going into a meeting room, let's take a walk, or something else to that effect going forward as well. So the one thing that you would have picked up with this TED Talk presentation was that the presenter here wasn't just presenting. What they were doing was they were telling a story. Now, storytelling is such a powerful vehicle that we have as individuals when we present, because that is a great way of engaging people, because people are invested in storylines. You know, if you kind of think about TV shows, if you think about movies, the reason why we watch episode after episode after episode on whichever streaming service that we're on of a specific show is because we're invested in the storyline. It's the same reason why we will kind of watch a continuity of a franchise of movies, is because we are getting that story kind of told throughout all of those movies. I mean, a great example of this is if you think about like the Marvel superhero movies. So for me, I was kind of a late bloomer to the Marvel movies, in that I'd watched some of the movies, but I'd watch them kind of out of order. I'd miss some movies out. But what I did was, before kind of the final movie that wrapped up the last kind of segment or last kind of phase, I actually watched the movies in kind of the timeline order, and I saw that there was a continuity, there was a storyline kind of interwoven throughout each one of those movies, even if it's just kind of the post-credit scenes. And that's something that invested in me to watch the next movie, to watch the next movie, to watch the next movie as well. And we want to kind of maybe incorporate storytelling or elements of storytelling within our presentations. Now, there are kind of 4 basic story types. These are actually based upon the works of an author called Christopher Booker, who has a book called The 7 Basic Plots: Why We Tell Stories. But the 4 basic story types you can see here on screen. We've got kind of an origin story. So this is kind of your typical, to quote kind of a Drake lyric, starting from the bottom, now we're here kind of story. So I started my marketing business with my laptop in the garage, and now I have workspaces in 30 countries across the world. You've then got future vision stories. So this is where you see yourself in so many years. So my marketing business is growing, and my goal is to have offices in 30 countries worldwide. You've then got your failure and success story. So this is where you're talking about kind of the setbacks that you've encountered. So my first couple of attempts to start my marketing business failed as I didn't have the right target market. I learned from my mistake and now have offices in 30 countries across the world. And then we've got realization story, what I like to call kind of the light bulb story. So I've been in the finance industry 15 years when I went to a talk on marketing and realized that I wanted to start my own marketing company, expanding to many different countries across the world. So these are kind of the 4 basic story types. There are other types of story types that you can find out online as well. But the one thing to note with these kind of 4 basic story types that you can see here on screen is that we want to kind of fit the right story type to whatever we are presenting. So for a budget report, we wouldn't necessarily be talking about an origin story, talking about, oh, this is where the company was founded, this is what happened, etc., because that's not relevant. For a budget report, we can actually use something like a failure and success story. So this was our revenue in Q1 of 2021, and this is our revenue in Q2 of 2022. So you're talking about maybe failure and success, especially if you've kind of built and kind of progressed up from what you had previously as well, and you're doing that kind of contrast and comparison there as well. Now for a company update, so maybe if you either run a company or you kind of work as part of an organization, and there's somebody kind of presenting to at the beginning of the new kind of financial year or the calendar year, especially if there's kind of new members of staff, that's where you can kind of maybe talk about the company origins. This is where we started. We had humble beginnings. We already had so many people working at the organization. Now we've got offices in 30 countries worldwide, perhaps as well. And then we've got kind of idea pitch. So for an idea pitch, something that works really great is a future vision, because at the moment it's just an idea. So the future vision is, I want my product that I want to create into existence to be sold worldwide, or whatever it might be. So we can use a future vision type story there as well. And some of you may have actually kind of sat through and kind of witnessed many idea pitches in the past. So in the UK, we've got a program called Dragon's Den. In America, they've got kind of an equivalent called Shark Tank, where you've got kind of a row of entrepreneurs, kind of investors who are just kind of sat there. And then you've got individuals who either have ideas or have started kind of the basics of a product kind of in terms of manufacturing and production. But what they're looking for is they're looking for investment to kind of supercharge their business. And that's why they're coming to these kind of investors. And this is where they're kind of pitching their idea in. So what they're looking for is they're looking for that investor, that entrepreneur to kind of get involved with the business. But in return, they're actually giving away kind of an equity in their organization as well. And that's kind of a great way to sometimes learn when it comes to kind of idea and kind of sales pitches at times as well. So it's important to kind of fit the right type of story to what you are presenting. Now, a few other considerations in this kind of preparation stage for a presentation is to ask ourselves, what is the goal? Why are we getting up on stage? What is the main reason? So if we think about Nilofer doing the presentation that we saw the video for, so the main goal of Nilofer was to get people to consider a walking meeting or generally other approaches. That was the main goal. That was the main reason for Nilofer getting up on stage and doing that TED Talk presentation. Another question that we want to kind of think about here is, what do we want our audience to think? So as a presenter, we have kind of an important kind of power at times, which is that we can persuade our audience, we can instruct them, we can entertain them, but what do we want them to think? It's very important to kind of, how can we sort of influence our audience as well? So that's another kind of consideration. What do we want them to kind of hopefully kind of remember at the end of our presentation in general as well? Now, something that actually goes hand in hand with kind of influence is, what do we want them to feel, and when do we want them to feel it? So this is talking about kind of the power of emotion, which is very, very important, because as human beings, we are kind of emotional. We're driven by emotions in general as well. So when we're talking about maybe your failure and success stories, and a lot of kind of entrepreneurs online tend to do this, and kind of a lot of business owners and kind of influencers online tend to do this really, really well, in that they will talk about their failures. Maybe they got 100 kind of rejection letters from an organization, but then the one that actually was an acceptance, that's what they'll talk about as well. But they'll take you on that journey, so you feel the emotions of, oh, do you know what, if I feel like kind of banging my head against the brick wall and nothing's working and nothing's going right for me, and you feel that emotion with that person who's delivering the presentation. But then you kind of feel the elation, and you see the elation in their face, and you feel it as well when they kind of achieve what they wanted to as well. So we want to kind of use emotion at times as well. Now, even if we're kind of presenting or kind of telling a story which is quite sort of what we would class as quite sort of maybe monotonous, something which is very kind of boring, or what we would think is boring. But a lot of the times what we think is boring is not necessarily what an audience would think is as boring as well. And if we are kind of very conscious of that fact, then we can sprinkle in a little bit of humor if that fits our presentation and fits our delivery style as well, going forward on that as well. And the final kind of question, just to kind of review here, is what's the one thing that you want your audience to take away with you? Now, the reason why that question is very important is because us as humans, we have a rather short attention span. So it's been estimated that the average human attention span is roughly about 8 seconds, which is not a long period of time, especially considering the average attention span of a goldfish is about 9 seconds. So we're not doing very well, are we, in that regards? But when it comes to presentations, not everybody's going to be tuned in for that whole kind of period of time that we are up on stage, that we are talking for as well, because we just generally kind of mentally tune out, and that's just kind of the way that we've kind of evolved. So from a presenter point of view, what can we think about? What kind of are some of the main points that we want to maybe emphasize as we go along throughout our presentation? What kind of one thing that we want them to take away with them and think, oh yeah, I sat through that presentation, I remember this is the one thing that I kind of picked up, or one main kind of one main kind of area that I kind of picked up from that particular presentation as well. So definitely kind of consider and think about that going forward as well. I'm sure many of you, with the 8-second attention span, many of you, as we've been kind of going through this webinar session, you might have thought, oh, what am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for dinner? Or, what other things have I got going on today? And that's fine, because when we're kind of consuming a presentation, we want to be inspired, we want to be entertained, we want to be educated, we want to be informed. But at the same time as well, we want to make sure as a presenter, we want to try and impart at least one key takeaway, or kind of mention a few things, and hopefully one of them are the things that somebody will take away with them going forward as well. Now, in terms of the way that we kind of create a presentation, we want a presentation to have a basic structure and flow. So if we think about kind of storytelling and stories in general, whether it be kind of stories in books or stories that people kind of speak and talk about, even kind of audio books, I guess, what does it tend to have? It has a structure, and the general structure of a story is that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what we generally want to create when it comes to a presentation. And you can see that in action here on screen. So you can see that you got your beginning, which is a background. So this is what I'm going to be talking about in my presentation. You've then got your kind of your middle, which we've kind of identified here as kind of a problem and solution section. So this particular structure here that you can see on screen actually works quite well with idea pitches or sales pitches. So this is a problem. People struggle with this in day-to-day life. Look at our solution. This is our shiny new fantastic product that will solve everything for you. So that's the solution, kind of the middle section. And then you've got your ending of your story, which is finishing off your presentation, the conclusion. So just to recap, this is what we talked about, and then you end off your presentation going forward as well. So it's important to have a clear structure, because having a clear structure provides a good flow to your presentation, and it makes it easy to follow for an audience as well. Now, all of this kind of structure and flow that we do create is actually underpinned by research, which is what we're kind of talking about this stage, which is all about kind of preparation. So we want to kind of know what we're talking about inside out. Think about kind of planning as well, which is what we're going to be talking about coming up shortly as well. And then also the design, which is what we're going to be talking about next as well. So planning, we've already kind of spoke about already, but we'll be kind of touching upon it towards the end of this session as well. And then design is what we're going to be coming on to next. So we've gone from delivering a presentation to telling a story to now telling a story for your audience. And that's kind of a natural progression, because ideally, we want to kind of, whenever we present, we want to make sure that we're grounding everything, or as much as possible, in the world of our audience. Similarly to, as I was mentioning with my science teacher, who's kind of grounding concepts in the world of kind of sport, because he knew how to kind of interact and engage with and kind of he knew his student audience in front of him, which was great going forward as well. So we want to make sure that we tailor make our presentations as much as possible going forward. So with that in mind, let's have a check-in to see if there's any sort of comments or questions, which I can't see at this stage, which is fine, but it's great that you're all been kind of getting involved, especially with kind of your memorable presentations earlier on as well. If you've got any further questions or comments that you'd like to make, feel free to pop them into the chat as we go along, as we're going to move on now to how we can build effective and engaging presentations. This is talking about kind of the design stage, or with also elements about kind of planning, because we want to kind of think about a few things before we actually go ahead and actually create a presentation. So first of all, we want to think about which presentation tool or tools do we want to use. Now, before we even think about kind of cherry picking which presentation tool that we want to choose and use, we want to use these three boxes that you can see on screen as kind of like a filter. So we want to think about whatever presentation tool that we're going to be using, whether it be slideshows, whether it be a whiteboard, whether it be other types of tools that we're going to be using. Think about our audience as well. So how many people are we going to be presenting to? Are we able to get our message across as effectively as possible with that particular presentation tool? So that's one consideration. Think about kind of the message that you're trying to convey. Is that particular presentation tool going to kind of do justice to what you are kind of looking to kind of get across? And also think about kind of the tools and technology that you have available as well. So if you think about kind of presenting in person, I mean, I know these are kind of things that I have to kind of keep in mind at times as well. So if you kind of are presenting at a venue or a meeting room, think about what sort of connections does the room have? Is it a straight kind of HDMI cable that goes into the TV and that connects to your laptop? Great. If not, is it a little bit more kind of complicated, where you've got a kind of an older projector which only takes VGA cable? You've got to connect that, and then you've got to get an adapter. So a few kind of considerations in that respect as well to think about. So use all three of these as kind of a little bit of a filter in terms of deciding which presentation tool routes kind of go down in general as well. Now, an important question that I tend to get a lot of the time is, Rakesh, to slide or not to slide? So shall I use slideshows or not? And I actually like this kind of phrase that you can see here on screen of to slide or not to slide. I think if Shakespeare went digital, this would be really kind of poetic, I guess. But the actual answer to this question is it depends. And it depends on the filter that we kind of just looked at, those three boxes. So we want to just think about how many people we're presenting to, think about the audience, think about the message that we're trying to convey, and is that presentation tool going to do us justice for that? And also think about what tools and technologies do we have available to us, and whether we have budgets to kind of get some of the tools that we don't necessarily have going forward as well. So it kind of really kind of varies and depends when it comes to kind of using slideshow presentation software or not going forward as well. So rather than kind of slideshow presentation, there are other tools and aids out there that you can use. There are some here on screen that you can see. One of them is Muriel, which is a fantastic digital collaboration tool. So if you kind of work for an organization, or you run an organization where you kind of work in various kind of teams and you're looking to kind of present, you can actually present kind of as a whole team, where people are kind of doing different things on the same presentation. So Muriel is really great for that. So definitely check that out. You've also got Canva, which is a fantastic tool. It's a graphic design tool, and you can use kind of a basic version at no charge, and then you can upgrade to kind of premium offering as well. And with Canva, you can create things like infographics. So rather than just text on screen, you can just create a nice infographic to illustrate a point sometimes as well. You've also got Slido. Slido is a really fantastic tool, something I've used many a time in the past for presentations, just to kind of make an audience more engaged. So you can kind of run things like polls live on screen, and you can sprinkle them into slideshow presentations as well, which is great. And you can also have kind of a Q&A section whereby people can ask questions. They'll appear on screen, and you can then answer them directly as well, rather than getting people to kind of raise their hands, and that might take up a little bit of time during your presentation as well. You've also got things like whiteboards. You've also got flip chart paper that you can use with board markers as well, or you can use nothing at all. Just use your voice, a little bit like what Nilofer's doing. I think Nilofer might have had kind of some sort of slideshow or kind of some photos behind on the TED Talk presentation stage, but you can use nothing at all. Just use your voice and just kind of get your point across that way as well. Now, in terms of choosing your tool, as I mentioned, kind of slideshow presentation tool, when it comes to any presentation, is probably the go-to that we all kind of tend to think about. Now, in terms of kind of slideshow presentation tools, there's a lot of slideshow presentation software out there already. You've got the likes of Microsoft PowerPoint, which has been around for a long time. You've also got the likes of Apple Keynote. You've also got something which is slightly different to kind of other slideshow presentation software, and that is called Prezi, Prezi, which is a really fantastic tool that's used by especially the creative industry, whereby you can create fantastic presentations where there's kind of animations that are used. So you can have kind of one slide, but within that one slide, you can kind of deep dive into other mini slides, and it kind of has a nice graphic in there as well. And it's probably something that I'm not really doing justice for as well, but feel free to have a look at some of the example presentations that that exist on the Prezi website if you want to kind of find out a bit more about that particular software as well. And then you also have Google Slides, which is what we're just going to be talking on a little bit more about coming up now. So Google Slides is a fantastic tool. It is available at no charge. It's part of the Google Workspace. There's a few kind of benefits that you can see here on screen. One of the best benefits that you can see here on screen, if I kind of highlight this, is with this graphic, is that you can actually, when you're creating a presentation, you can actually work on a presentation at the same time with other people, and you can see what contributions other people have made as well. So that's quite useful to actually see and kind of do in real time. It's great for kind of team collaboration going forward as well. You can also access Google Slides anywhere. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can jump onto slides.google.com, sign into your Google account, and away you go. You've got access to your presentation. And the beauty is as well with Google Slides is that your presentation that you're creating, your slideshow, it automatically backs up to Google Drive as well. And I've had this in the past where my laptop has actually just kind of turned itself off randomly, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if my work is saved or not because I forgot to hit save. But the beauty of Google Slides is that it saves automatically. And I had this before when I forgot to plug in my laptop charger, and then my laptop just went dead. So that is something that came in really, really handy for me. So I was able to kind of pick up where I last left off as well. Now with Google Slides, you can choose a theme, which is quite useful, especially this kind of is useful when you are kind of looking to create a very much kind of a uniform slideshow presentation, and kind of want to kind of add in your own kind of your own business or your own brand's colors going forward as well. You can kind of add them to every single slide, make every slide look and feel very much kind of part of the whole presentation, even though you're just going to have different content on there going forward as well. Now, there are a few kind of shortcuts and hacks that you can use with Google Slides. One of these is you can edit a master slide. As you can see with this kind of short video, you can go into the slide tab, click on edit master. And if you wanted to just maybe change the font of the header of all of your slides, you don't have to go through each individual slide. You can just edit the master slide, change the font, and that font change actually applies to all the headers that you've created throughout the whole presentation. Now, there are more kind of hacks. I'm sure you could probably jump onto YouTube like you can see with this YouTube video, and kind of find more other kind of time-saving hacks going forward as well. Now, you've also got the navigation bar. I'm sure many of you would have seen this either with Google Slides or other similar presentation softwares out there. So you can add things such as text boxes, image shapes, lines, adding kind of backgrounds, layouts, themes. Also do kind of transitions as well. So how one slide flicks to another as well. And also what you can do, you can hit that big present button, but also you can see that there is a little down arrow where you can actually select the option present in speaker view or presenter view. And what that does is that it will open up your presentation in kind of full screen, but it will also give you a box which will open up, which will be your presenter notes. If you've created notes for each one of your slides, you'll have them available. So if you are connecting your laptop up to a television or laptop up to another screen, it's nice, especially if you've not presented something before. It's always nice to have some notes at hand in case you do maybe get a little bit kind of nervous or get a little bit flustered whilst you are presenting as well. Now, a few of the considerations when it comes to kind of creating a presentation is think about the title of your presentation. You want to make sure that it's impactful. And essentially, you want it to kind of explain what you were talking about. So you don't want to be creating titles which say one thing, but then talk about something else. You might have kind of heard of that phrase clickbait, where people say, oh, yes, learn how to make £1 million in a day. So you have videos like that, but then somebody's talking about this is how you invest money, and it's going to take time to get to £1 million. So that's actually where you are essentially underselling, but you're getting people in the door just to kind of view your presentation. And that's something that, especially from a business or brand point of view, that tends to kind of lose trust and value. People tend to kind of lose trust and value within you once they've kind of sat through that and kind of experienced that themselves as well. So we want to make sure that whatever we are talking about is exactly what we're going to be kind of presenting and telling a story about in general as well. So the best way I like to kind of think about titles is a little bit like, so in the UK, there's a well-known kind of fence painting company, and their slogan or their catchphrase, especially on their television adverts, is it does what it says on the tin. And that's the way to kind of look at titles for presentations. You want to literally title something exactly with what you are going to be discussing about. So even with this webinar live training session that we're doing today, it's called Build Engaging Presentations, and that's what we are going through today as well. So that's something to kind of keep in mind going forward as well. Now, with our presentations, especially with things like slides, try and use as little text as possible. One, it's better for aesthetics. It just looks better on screen if you've got less text and you're just using kind of bullet points like you can see here on screen, rather than using kind of big paragraphs going forward as well. And the way that I always kind of like to look at this particular tip on designing of using as little text as possible is that if you put everything that you want to into a slideshow presentation or into other presentation aid tools that we've spoken about, then what's the point in us as a presenter being on stage? What's the point in us getting onto a webcam? There's no point, is there? If everything's on stage, we can just hit play and let it kind of auto run. Maybe we can just kind of pre-record how we're going to be running this training session or this kind of in-person presentation perhaps as well. So we want to kind of always remember that we as a presenter are the presentation. What we have with us are presentation aids. It sometimes helps to kind of illustrate points and kind of provides extra content to what we are talking about. So we always want to kind of make sure that we feel empowered that this is, we are kind of essentially the presentation, and the tools that we're using are essentially just there to kind of aim and just to kind of guide and provide a little bit more context for the audience going forward as well. Now, some top presentation tips you can see here on screen. Be considerate about the number of slides that you are going to use if you are using slideshow presentation software. We want to kind of keep to kind of concise bullet points that we spoke about. Think about our font as well. There's some fantastic fonts out there. You've got the fantastic kind of calligraphy style fonts, if I could say that correctly, which are really great, look beautiful. But from a presentation point of view, it's hard to read for an audience. So we want to make sure that we keep it kind of simple and very legible in general as well. Vary up your content as well. So not only kind of have text on screen, but also intermix some photos, maybe videos if possible, and relevant to do so as well. And also change up your page, something that we'll talk about in the final part of this session when we talk about presentation skills as well. And something very, very important before we go on to presentation skills in this final kind of segment of talking about kind of the design section, is when it comes to running an online presentation, something that's become more and more common, especially over the last couple of years. More and more of us have actually ran presentations online. A few considerations. One is screen sharing. Share with care, but don't overshare is what I say. So if we are going to be sharing a screen, we want to make sure that if we're sharing a particular, let's say, a web browser kind of going through something and we've got bookmarks on there that we don't want other people to see, just hide those bookmarks into another folder. Just kind of make sure that we're not kind of showing things that we don't want other people to see as well. So just be mindful of that. Think about kind of video for participants. What platform are you going to be running your presentation on? Do you want kind of active feedback? Is it the case of that you've got too many people and then you kind of run things through like the likes of YouTube where people can get involved through a medium like live chat like you've all been getting through today as well? Or is it a case of there's going to be a smaller number so you can maybe run this through the likes of Google Meet or other video call platforms out there as well? Also think about kind of the ease of use of whichever presentation software tool that you're using online, and also think about the cost, whether you need to upgrade to a better microphone, whether you need to invest in lighting or a webcam as well, and kind of factor that in when it comes to kind of running online presentations as well. So with that in mind, let's have a check-in to see if there's any sort of comments or questions. So we've got a question here from Cara, who's asked, what is the best way to create notes for a presentation? Keep track of where you are when delivering a presentation as well. And that's something that we'll actually kind of touch upon coming forward or going forward into the final part, Cara. But yeah, in terms of kind of creating notes for presentation, I'd always kind of say, if we're kind of creating something like a slideshow, just kind of have a bullet point of like 2 to 3 things that we want to get across. So if we are looking at our presenter notes and our mind just goes blank for a second, at least we can kind of use them as kind of refreshers. The worst thing I'd say is to kind of go kind of information overload and kind of write paragraphs and like essays worth of information in our kind of speak or presenter notes, because that is something which when we're just kind of flicking or glancing down to look at our notes, that's something which can sort of kind of disrupt our flow even further if we see a lot of text on a piece of paper or on screen in general as well. So let's have a look at another question. So Shroud has asked, if we choose the present notes view while presenting, are these notes visible to our audience, or can we only see them? So yeah, for virtual presentation, only we can see them. So typically we would only have, so if we have kind of a 2-screen setup, so we would have our presenter notes, which if we are using them, we would make sure that we drag them onto our own screen. But then the screen that is being shared, or the tab that's being shared, is on a particular different window as well. And you can actually just screen share on the same device. If you wanted to just share, you can just share as a different window, share so that again, those presenter notes, those speaker notes are not visible to other people. It's just for your eyes only going forward as well. And Ali's asked, how do you speak with power, engaging, catchy voice to attract your audience and to develop your voice as well? That's something that we'll all cover into the final part of this question going forward, Ali. So thanks very much for all of those questions. So let's actually run into the final part of this section or this webinar session, which is all about boosting your presentation skills going forward. So a key consideration is, what kind of presenter will we be? Very, very important question to kind of consider here. Now, in terms of what kind of presenter we will be, it can seem quite kind of an abstract question to kind of answer here. Now, the way that we, or kind of the style, the presenter style that we will actually create really depends on how many people that we're presenting in front of and who we are presenting in front of as well, because we want to be able to adapt to our audience. So I would typically kind of change my delivery or presentation style if I'm delivering a presentation online like I'm doing right now, to how I would deliver in person to a community group of 30 people, compared to if I was to give kind of a keynote address at a conference full of 1,000 people. The way that I would kind of speak and kind of my style as a presenter would be very much kind of different, and it would adapt to those kind of various circumstances as well. But the one thing to always note, whether we're presenting to one person, whether we are presenting to 50 people or 100 or 1,000 people, is that we want to essentially turn crowds into conversations, because everybody is just a person, right? So we want to try, and one thing that I definitely kind of learned as I kind of learned and I've done more and more public speaking, is that we want to kind of, rather than kind of talking to people and saying, oh, do this, and kind of go down the instructional route, we want to kind of go down the route of kind of persuasion a little bit more. So get people involved. So rather than talk about, right, I'm kind of in the teacher mode, you're the student mode, we want to kind of create that more kind of conversational style in general as well. And that's something that kind of develops with time, and also is useful when you kind of pick up things from other individuals going forward as well. So always want to look to kind of turn crowds into conversations. Now, when it comes to audience participation, we want to kind of interact with the audience, so ask questions, kind of read back answers, answer questions as well, be appreciative of questions that come in as well, because it's great, because it's nice as a presenter when you're getting feedback from your audience, because it shows that they are listening, they're paying attention to what you were saying, and also kind of follow up on those questions where possible and if time allows as well. But the worst thing that you can do when it comes to questions is to make answers up. That is the surefire and quickest way to lose credibility as a presenter, is to make an answer up. Because the chances are as well is the time that you're maybe presenting in person, there'll probably be somebody who actually has the answer in the room. And you've given a completely different answer, and that person who actually does know the answer will have lost all credibility in you as a presenter. So that's kind of the worst thing that you can kind of do, is to make the answer up. The worst, kind of the easiest thing to kind of do is just kind of hold your hands up, say, look, don't know the answer, feel free, we can kind of, especially this applies more to kind of in-person events, let's have a chat after this presentation, after this workshop, this webinar, whatever, or seminar, I guess, if it's in person. Let's have a chat a little bit later. Let's kind of work through this together. And that's kind of a great way of kind of following up as a presenter as well. And also another part of audience participation is listening, active listening, very, very important, acknowledging what people are saying. But what we don't want to get into is getting to kind of too much of a dialogue, because the one thing to also note with a presentation is that we're on a time limit. So we're only on stage, or we're only presenting on a webinar or kind of general online presentation for a certain period of time. So we want to be conscious of all of those factors. Now, we do want to avoid content overload at times as well, but a few other things to kind of bear in mind when it comes to presentation skills is tailor your story to the relevant audience, something that we spoke about earlier on. So if we're in a room full of sports stars a little bit, or kind of sports students, a little bit like my science teacher was, he was able to kind of adapt his storytelling to his audience, I guess, as well. So we want to look to do that where possible. I know, and I appreciate sometimes that when we're presenting, we don't really know who we're presenting to, so that's where we have to be a bit more kind of generic in general. When it comes to kind of remembering things, I think it's a common question that I tend to get is, Rakesh, how do I kind of remember things? Sometimes I don't know how I can store all this information in my mind for a presentation. One of those tools that we can use is presenter notes, speaker notes, something that was mentioned earlier on by Kara and Shraddha with your questions. But also something that's really, really useful when it comes to memorizing is try to remember up to 3 things to say per slide or per infographic. Because once you know the main points that you want to get across, anything else you can actually think about and kind of look at the clock, do a bit of a clock check and think, oh, actually, I've actually got a little bit more time to elongate and talk about this or that. And that's where you can kind of branch off of each one of those 3 key points. But if you're running short on time, get those 3 points across on that slide, and off you go onto the next slide going forward as well. So it kind of gives you that kind of structure as well, which I think is very important. So try to remember up to 3 things per slide, or per kind of whiteboard section, or whatever tool that you're using in general as well, and that will kind of help to provide a little bit of clarity, and also helps to kind of calm nerves at times as well, especially if we've not presented for a while and we're not really sure, oh, how to remember all this. It's nice just to kind of break things down into kind of small digestible chunks as well. And also remember to pause and take a breath at times as well, and that's really useful, especially if we are getting a little bit flustered, or we are way ahead of the time and we've been talking at a rate of knots. This is what we all tend to do. I've done this before. I'm sure Anthony will totally agree as well. When it's something that we've not presented before, or we're a little bit more kind of nervous about, at times we tend to present and we talk really, really, really fast. So then we actually end up finishing our presentation a little bit too quickly. And sometimes it's hard for the audience to kind of take everything in, because you've spoken at such a high speed as well. So that's where we want to introduce the factor of kind of just taking deep breaths. And this is useful if we're not really sure what we're going to be saying next. Just take a bit of a breath. Now, sometimes we get into our own mind and think, if I take a breath, or if I just pause for a second, are people going to think, oh, they don't know what they're going to say next? They're a little bit flustered. But that's not necessarily the case, because from an audience point of view, because you've been talking for such an extended period of time, it's even nice for them and for their brain to kind of just take a little bit of a breather and rest before kind of going back into things going forward as well. So there are a few things to remember when it comes to kind of presenting, in terms of kind of remembering things on slides as well. Now, one thing to note is your voice is a powerful tool, and I'm sure that Mariah Carey would agree with that statement. So a few things to remember with your voice is think about your volume. So this kind of is in line with the question asked by Ali in terms of how do you speak with kind of powering engagements as well. So volume is a great kind of way of doing that at times. So speaking in lower volume is useful. Kind of say, oh, I want to tell you a story. And that makes people kind of listen in a little bit more, because you're speaking at a lower volume. But then you can talk a little bit more excited, at a bit more high volume, if you want to kind of just raise the energy levels at times as well. So think about how you use your volume and when you use it wisely as well. Think about your style, which is what we talked about earlier on. We want to kind of adapt our presentation style to the amount of people that we're presenting in front of, or kind of the demographic of people that we're speaking to as well. Think about the tonality of our voice as well. So I could have easily gone through this training session speaking in a very robotic, monotonous voice throughout the whole session, and you would have been very, very bored. So you want to think about kind of changing things up, change up your pitch, change up your tonality in general, just to help to kind of provide a little bit of kind of excitement, a little bit of energy, a little bit of buzz to whatever you are presenting as well. And also think about pacing as well. So some slides or some kind of infographics or whatever kind of tools that you're using, or certain sections of your presentation that you're just speaking and you're using no tools at all, certain things you can kind of just gloss through very, very quickly, and certain things you can take your time and kind of be a bit slower with that going forward as well. Now, another important factor when it comes to presentation skills is body language. So the non-verbal communication that we kind of send out as well. So think about whether we come across as happy or sad, nervous or confident, honest or trustworthy. So if I was to kind of fold my arms, just kind of carry on talking to you for this presentation, just keep looking around, and I'm not looking at the webcam, then that kind of, people may just think, oh, is he a bit nervous? Is he a bit sad? Is he disinterested? So that's something that that's kind of non-verbal cues that you kind of pick up on. And a lot of people, and we all tend to do this with online presentations, we tend to kind of look down at the screen rather than looking at the webcam, looking at the dot. So that's what we want to do. We want to use that kind of eye contact where possible, as much as possible, especially if it's online. And in person, we want to kind of create that kind of eye contact as well with our audience. If we do get a little bit nervous, power poses is a fantastic way of kind of tricking our minds, thinking that we are more confident than we actually are. So you've got kind of the Wonder Woman or the performer pose here. There's a fantastic TED talk by Amy Culler that you're more than welcome to kind of check out on TED Talks to kind of find out a bit more about power poses. But it's a great way to kind of just trick yourself before you kind of go up on stage, before you do an online presentation, into the kind of making yourself more confident, or feel more confident in general as well. Now, a few things to be mindful of. Be mindful of your stance, your movement as well, so how you're using hands, and think about connecting. So I spoke about eye movement, kind of eye contact as well, either both face-to-face and in person, and online as well through the webcam as well. And final thing is kind of practice, very important. Practice makes progress. So practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, practice makes progress. So just to kind of wrap up on presentation skills, we want to adapt to our audience, think about our voice, consider our body language, what it's saying, and practice as much as possible. So any final questions, which I can't see here at the moment, which I believe that Anthony has been busy typing away and answering into the live chat for you as well. So let's have a look at your next steps. One of your next steps is to definitely check out this fantastic resource I mentioned at the beginning of this session. So free Google Quiz certificates, which are free flexible online training programs, which are designed to earn you job-ready skills in kind of high-growth, high-demand careers like IT support, project management. And you can find out more information. You use the link link here on screen. So I hope that you found this session useful. If you did, both myself and Anthony would appreciate a little bit of feedback. Let us know what you enjoyed in particular. Got a feedback form link on screen here. Feel free to also share how you enjoyed this this Google Digital Garage webinar session. If you are going to share your experience through something like social media, feel free to include our hashtag, which is hashtag Digital Garage as well. And feel free to also check out the Google Digital Garage website. Sign up for more webinars. Sign up for some of the online courses. Remember, it's the Fundamentals of Digital Marketing course, which is the course that upon completion you will actually receive a certificate at no charge from Google, recognizing that you've completed that course as well. So apart from that, I want to say a massive thank you to Anthony, who I'm sure agrees has been a wonderful chat moderator. So feel free to show your appreciation for Anthony in the live chat. And thank you for tuning in to this Google Digital Garage webinar session today. Good luck with your next presentation. And I look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. So thank you very much. Take care and goodbye.